Welcome to the Ask Weldon Show, episode 269. Today we're going to talk about goals for VoD review between coaches and pros, how to do well without a warm-up, school versus League of Legends, and how to be more aware when you're playing competitively. Specifically, this guy asks in Call of Duty. Let's jump into the show. All right, not a lot of announcements today. Hope you guys had a happy Thanksgiving. And we're trying to get back on the schedule with the show. Today, I am starting an hour late because we had Thanksgiving break yesterday, essentially. But next Monday, we're aiming to start again at 11, just as we did this week. So 11 o'clock start time for the show. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can check out twitch.tv/MyGamesWeldon to catch the show live, which is happening right now. Hello, Twitch. Hello, YouTube. And if you're watching this on Twitch, you can always catch the show later on YouTube if you miss a day. That's similar. I think the link is actually below the stream here. If you can't find it, just ask me. And we'll jump into the first question. Once again, you can send your questions to me, anchor.fm/Weldon Green. And there is where you will find the audio version of the show with the podcast, links to every single platform that podcasts are hosted on, and get it onto your favorite listening device there. The first question is from Jacob.
Hi, Weldon. My next question for you is about VoD reviews. I was wondering if you have anything that you think is normally overlooked or should be emphasized more when reviewing VoDs, or things that you try to focus or work on with your team or players that you're coaching, and also what you think players should be taking away from VoDs and what the goals of VoD reviews should be.
Short and to the point. All right. I'm going to start with just what the goals of VoD review are. There's basically two main goals. One of those is for learning motor movements. So essentially, you want to confront and find your mistakes as swiftly as possible from the time that you made them. So the best time to discover mistakes is within the first 45 seconds after you've made that mistake, and the brain can just notice it and know that it made a mistake and start working on kind of like fixing that process. But it's helpful to go and look through the game, see your mistakes and kind of relive them to get a little bit of that learning juice, you would say, neurologically. And then the second thing that is done in VoD review is typically theory crafting, where you are trying to find new mistakes that are not yet noticed as mistakes by your brain in the moment. So you're essentially working with your teammates to say, is this supposed to feel correct because it does, or is this supposed to feel incorrect because it didn't go well? And also, of course, to erase the I would say misattribution of mistakes. So does this feel incorrect? It feels incorrect. Was it a mistake? And then as a team coming to the agreement that no, that was the right thing to do, kind of like choreography. So I think in VoD review, the main goal is maybe 5 minutes or so of personal review of your errors to kind of get them fresh in your head, the ones that you already know were mistakes. And then about 15 minutes of looking through and coming to a consensus about the team's errors. And any errors that you made that your teammates think were mistakes, or ones that you thought were mistakes that your teammates did not. And then the rest of it should be spent on choreography. Either the rest of that 15 minutes or everything else that you have after that, just choreography with the team. Everything in practice is kind of geared toward trying to make the team more efficient and have better teamwork. With pretty much any game that is 5 people, that's going to be the bar to success. So League of Legends is a little bit different because you're not 5 versus 5 all the time. You're in all these little 1 versus 1, 2 versus 2 scenarios. So it's really different compared to some other team sports where there's heavy choreography constantly, like basketball, for example. But yeah, that still exists in League of Legends, and it is usually the deciding point of the game. So it's kind of nice to usually work back from those moments in terms of the efficacy of the team. All right, let's jump into announcements. I kind of already went over the fact that we are broadcasting at 11 on Twitch, and you can check out the day after on YouTube, and that you should submit your questions for the show. We need new questions now. We're going to be working towards wrapping up the ones that I have in the bank. So anchor.fm/Weldon Green. Questions about career, professional play, addiction to video games and well-being, and obviously performance psychology as well. So all of those kind of fall within the purview of my expertise. All right, let's jump into the second question from Brett.
Hi, Weldon. I'm a Rocket League player, and my issue is that I never seem to play at my best without some extended warm-up period earlier in the day. If I'm getting on for the first time in a given day, I always play really poorly for the first couple of hours or so, but if I leave and come back later that night, I always find myself playing really well. And if I leave and come back again after playing for many hours, broken up throughout the day, and it's late at night, then that's when I'm playing at my absolute best. This is a big problem for me because if I only have a couple hours to play in a day, then that doesn't really give me time to reach that ultra warmed up state where I can rank up. Also, many important tournaments start earlier in the day, and caffeine doesn't really have the same effect as this extended warm up. I'm wondering if this is a normal thing and how can I mitigate it so that I always perform at my best all the time.
All right, this is a really important question, and also a very complex one, Brett. So I don't think it's quite as simple as warm up or not warm up. For example, you're playing in the evening. There could be a lot of things that are more conducive to your higher performance in the evening. For example, you're done with everything that you could do for the day, right? You don't have things weighing down in your mind like, oh, I need to stop playing at some point and go do this. So I only have this limited play time. At night, you're kind of free to play until you drop, essentially, and also you're more tired, and so you're more willing to take risks that your day brain is kind of wary of, or maybe more caught up in the cogitation of. At night, you can just go with the flow a little bit more. On a lot of projects, writers often, when you're writing a sentence, you're thinking not of the sentence you're writing solely, but also of what people think when they're reading your sentence. You're thinking overly much of the structure, and then at night, when you get to the end of your ability to just self-judge and you finally let it go and you start writing, you can just, spew out literature and content because your judgmental portion of your brain has kind of consigned itself to rest or sleep or giving up. So there's a lot of creatives who mix the concept of performance in a task that is more difficult under a judgmental brain with being a night owl or whatever. When in reality, that's possible to pull off during the day if you're working also on controlling your mind and setting up those moments where you can have that kind of peace, or else you are agreeing that you don't have that kind of peace and you're leaning into the kind of pressure in a performance conducive way, in a way that you don't need to at night because it's automatic. So you actually manually have to do it during the day. Okay, another thing is you can have a self-fulfilling prophecy with flow state. So you kind of like are looking for the signs of your mistakes during the day, whereas at night you're kind of forgiving yourself a lot, or you are not looking for the signs, or you're kind of trusting yourself a lot more. You could be taking more risks or playing in a way that is more aggressive and domineering on the I don't know what it's called. Is it the field in Rocket League? So that's another factor that can go into it. And then of course there is the warm-up factor, but warm-up, generally speaking, we need to talk about the science of warm-ups here. Okay. So the science of warm-ups in the biological sense, let's break it down to like the most basic thing is energy flow. When you start running, just like straight up sprinting down the road, the very first thing that needs to happen is that your cells need to start pulling in more glucose, like instantly. And so they start doing so. But there's got to be some fuel within the cell that is already being burnt. Otherwise, you would just collapse immediately. Your muscles will stop working. So the process of burning up the fuel that is like right there in the mitochondria, and then burning up the fuel right there in the muscle, and then burning up the fuel that's right there in the mitochondria, and then in the cellular tissue, and then in the intracellular tissue, and then finally pulling on the blood, and then the heart and the body system recognizing that it needs to upregulate all of the glucose delivery systems, and then shifting most of your blood from your torso out into your limbs, and shutting down things like your digestion and whatnot, and just going into the mode of oxygen and glucose delivery to cells to develop adenosine triphosphate and shuttling pyruvate out of your active muscles down into muscles that are like more chill and not doing anything at the moment to like finish the Krebs cycle there. So you have this biological necessity of a warm up that occurs in this kind of biochemical chain of preparation until about 5 minutes into a run, you have a full direct line from the oxygen that goes into your mouth and goes to your cell, and from the glucose that is in your liver directly to the cell. And it's kind of like at each step of the way is full, and the chemicals are waiting, the molecules are waiting to like push to the next or take the space of the ones that are in front of it. So that's the biological warm-up, right? When you step out of that and you're talking about sports that this biological warm-up is not a component, like getting the energy regulation system not a part of it, then we're talking about more of a psychological warm-up where you're kind of making sure that you have all of your instincts honed, that you have those systems in the brain fresh and ready to go. And generally speaking, you wouldn't say that this would take all day. This is something that could take, that should take the brain, if you're really thinking about it, just a moderate number of repetitions or rehearsals. So maybe a warm-up game or 2 warm-up games, something less than 60 minutes in length would be enough to refresh all of the circuitry and to like hit every single trigger in terms of what it is that you have trained yourself in. So it sounds to me like something else is going on here. This is not a warm-up and then performing better situation. And maybe that fact alone and the self-talk that you're orienting around it, which you will now kill because now you have new self-talk, will allow you to escape that reality where you feel like you're performing better. And I say feel like you're performing better at night because you did talk a little bit about ranking up, but I don't actually have your real numbers. And I think maybe if you looked at your metrics, that wouldn't necessarily hold up. I'm not really sure if you're playing a lot of ranked games in the day or if you're just warming up in order to not lose and then playing them at night. And so you end up ranking up at night because that's when you're actually playing ranked. Right? So I think that you should challenge your assumptions. I think that you should challenge your conception of what a warm-up is and what it should be. And then I think that you should try to understand what's really going on there that's causing higher performance in the evening. And also question about whether or not that's really accurate or true, or if it just feels like it is, because it's harder to play during the day because you're more self-critical and you have more self-critical thoughts you have to deal with, and you have to spend more effort pushing your mind back to focusing on the game and not focusing on tangential things or being stressed out about a deadline of stopping playing that is coming up where you have to go do chores or do laundry and things like that. So make sure to go through kind of a self-analysis, self-critique, reflection of all of those things that I brought up and come back with either a refined question or a solution that you came up with. Thank you for the question, Brett. All right, make sure to check out the Mind Games beta. I just launched the app about a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, and then I took a break after a very long burn up to that project. Lasted about 2 weeks before I had to just chill out from it for a bit. So we're back on the horse and we're starting to get in the new content. The old course is found now within the app. So you can go in the app, you can go to the old course portfolio and you can go through the course. And then meanwhile, we're also up to day 8, I think, of the 50-day content series within the app. So make sure that you come and participate in the beta if you want to join the Mind Games program and get the kind of training that I provide also for free on this show, essentially. But more in depth, obviously, and more tailored to high performance. And the beta is a good thing to get into because the price is lower. You will get a beta tag. That's basically it. All right.
Hey Weldon, I'm 20 years old and I've been playing League for 6 to 7 years. I usually just play with friends when they get on and solo rank to gold for the end of the year awards. In high school, I did wrestling and discovered I really liked competing. My parents told me to drop wrestling in college to focus more on school, but I still played bare minimum League for the rewards. I'm sitting at a 3.2 GPA in my third year of college, no internship or clubs, as I'm not as passionate about my major. I chose it simply for the challenge and continuing it out of obligation towards my parents. Is me peaking at gold every season a sign to not chase this pro player dream? Or should I be able to commit to a game and do school at the same time? If so, do you have any tips? Because I'd much rather be competing in esports than in my majors job market.
All right, so I think that focusing on school and a esports career is both possible and also makes you better. Part of the reason of that is that if you are able to maintain a high GPA and participate in school and graduate successfully, and even a little bit of social life, not a lot, but a little bit of social life, and also you're able to get to a very, very high rank in a game, then that means that your practice quality is very high and your skill when you are playing, the things that you're getting out of each hour is more than other people are getting out of each hour. And that's what you're focusing on, right? Because you have all of this busy life, so you only get to play for a certain amount of time. So your brain knows that, and you focus a lot on maximum effort during those hours. And the result is that your learning process, the skill with which you develop new capabilities within the game, the skill with which you challenge yourself and the mistakes that you make, the time that you spend in the game learning and improving versus just having fun and doing escapism is all modified by the environment of your practice, which is a limited, time-regulated, intensive, deadline kind of feeling. And all of that leads to you then being at a point where if you increase the volume of your training, you will get better because your training is already high quality. Now, if you just focus on volume and you end up just training a lot and you sacrifice all of the time that you could be spending on school and the brain cycles that you could be spending also on your social life and keeping up with friends, doing things for them that build the bonds that you're going to retain your entire life. It's important to focus on that in college because I'm still friends with most of my college buddies, and you're not going to have another period like that in your life where you are surrounded by people of your exact age and peer group with which to, and life situation with which to bond with. So it's going to be much more challenging to develop deep and long-term relationships with friends, with a friend group essentially like after college. It happens obviously, but less often. And so you also want to spend some time on that. And because you are doing all of that, your brain is essentially like knowing that the time you're spending on the game is important and limited. And then thus, if you can pull it off in that limited amount of time with the extra focus that you have and the extra zest that you bring to that concentrated training time, you have more to spread out when you switch to volume training. What I was saying was if you give up all that and you just train volume, you're going to end up wasting a lot of time. You're going to end up spending hours just playing the game in a rigmarole, in a loop, not actually improving. And it's just going to end up being wasted time. So I recommend using your playtime and limiting it to like no more than 4 hours a day maximum, and not 7 days a week, obviously. And 4 hours is like the top end, right? That you could have far less than that. And making sure that you can succeed off of that, like making sure that you can get good essentially at a game with that kind of investment. Because if that's the case, then you could go pro, and you can put the time towards it. And then the rest is like networking and luck and serendipity and making sure that you're in the top ladders, with the people who are streaming and getting your name out there and pinging people for teams and whatnot, but and keeping a black book of all the scouts and contacting them all the time, sending them a one-pager with your skills and capabilities and assets and what you're good at, what you're bad at, and et cetera, et cetera. So all of that kind of like soft stuff, but until you get there, make sure that you can actually swing your weight once the game is your only focus, essentially. All right, yeah, that's my answer to that. Do both. You always need to make sure that you are. There was a definition. Let me think if I remember this. There was a definition for freedom from an economist that I really enjoyed, and I don't remember who it was, and I don't even remember the exact phrasing of the definition. But the essential idea was the ability to keep all paths open to you until the last possible moment of a decision garners you the most freedom. So a choice is freedom, and not having a choice is not freedom. So one of the reasons that wealthy people are more free is because they can, up until they go on their vacation, they can keep the option of like not going on their vacation, right? They can like buy the tickets the last day, or they can buy the tickets and then cancel and not worry about it. Whereas like another person has to like buy the tickets way in advance and then plan for it, and that's the day. And like they don't have as much freedom if like their kid gets the flu. They're questioning like, do we go or do we not go? Like, right? So it's inherently less freedom in that system. So the basic concept is you want to do school and you want to make yourself good at esport, and you want to keep the freedom to choose either route because you don't know which one you're going to be in. So don't lock yourself down heavily. Make sure that you can do both of them so that you have maximum freedom in your little like system, right? That was a very cool definition of freedom from an economist that I heard. Probably it was on Freakonomics Radio. I can't imagine any other place that I would hear a definition for freedom from an economist. But yeah, the concept is something that is readily employed in decisions like this, where you have the opportunity to do two things. There's no reason not to do both, and to try to make sure that you can do both successfully, so that when the time comes for an actual fork in the road, you haven't limited yourself prematurely to one decision. There are a lot of people that live out this falseness in their life where they limit themselves to one decision subconsciously or like aggressively, and then they keep pretending as if they're going to be able to pick something else, right? They keep pretending as if when the day comes where they have to decide, they're going to be able to pick either option, but it's not really true. And they made sure that it wasn't true. And that's a lack of foresight and a lack of self-reflection. And if you're in that state, a lot of times it's better to, and you're really good at knowing who you are and what you're doing, a lot of times it's better to not waste any time with the decision that you've already decided that in 2 years you're not going to do, right? So let's think of some examples. Try to we do this all the time in Crystal and I's life here, where like we think out the long-term consequences of like a specific set of actions, and we're like, so that means that in like 6 months there's no possibility that like our kid is going to this particular school, because right now we're essentially making this career choice and this thing and this academic choice, and this is going to be where it leads, and so there's no point to that, ergo there's no point to doing these things to make sure that he has more opportunity towards that school thing, because like keeping that door open is just useless because we're never going to choose it. So you can leave the door swinging ajar, you can shut it or whatever, but you just don't have to waste any more time like trying to make sure it's propped open. That's the basic idea. I didn't get really concrete with that example because I don't want to violate my kids' privacy or my family's privacy, but I'll try to come up with a better example next time that is more esports performance specific. Meanwhile, let's jump into the last question of the show. And then I'll go back to Twitch chat. And if you're watching this on YouTube, come to Twitch, join us for the show, and hang out after so we can chat about the answer.